that was one way to go. That was an interesting way to get killed. Killing people left and right. Your boy, George Stark, was not a very nice guy. Hi, I'm a conspiracy wannabe, and the 8th book I decided to read from Stephen King is The Dark Half. So The Dark Half is the first book in the sobriety era of Stephen King, and there were definitely fears of him losing the mojo. Was he just a product of substance abuse, or did he have talent without it? For those of you who are not aware, the inspiration of this plot, it's most likely the fact of, well, when Richard Bachman was found out to be Stephen King's pen name, he used that energy, that desire, that frustration to drive the plot of The Dark Half. So first impressions of this book is, it was good. It was enjoyable to read. There were definitely some parts I thought maybe were slightly drawn out, but overall I thought that I liked the book and it kept me guessing. So yeah, let's talk about the plot. Essentially, Thad Beaumont and his wife staged the death of his pen name, George Stark, after being found out by some people. And this essentially spawns the evil incarnate himself, George Stark, who ends up going on a killing spree on people who were associated with the whole presser, the whole magazine article. And I have to say, this is one of the more fast-paced starts of a King book that I've read so far. It just gets into it right away, and George Stark just starts fucking killing people left and right. There was a scrotum scene at one point, which was wild as hell. Guns, knives. Your boy, George Stark, was not a very nice guy. He was a badass killing machine. And this pace drives and hooks the reader into the meat and potatoes of the book, which is Thad actually a schizophrenic murderer, or is there actually someone else killing under the guise of Thad Beaumont? And this is where we see the introduction of Officer Pangborn, who, yeah, pretty much replaces Bannerman. The whole atmosphere of when he brings in his 2 cops and they're interrogating Thad, man, it was good. It was really intense, and it really had a really good murder mystery vibe. And you know, as the story progresses, you're left wondering, and I was left wondering, I'm like, dude, am I gonna find out at the end of this book that this guy just having a schizophrenic episode and he's just like tweaking out, or does he actually have a counterpart, right? And I think that was the suspense of the book that was really good. I thought that it really kept me thinking. Even after I put the book down, I guess it depends on the reader. And I think that's probably a big one, is that depending on the reader, some people may have figured it out much earlier than others, or some like me kept guessing a bit longer and longer, because you know, it's Stephen King. You never know what's going to come out of the woodwork, right? And I think like the true moment of when we start really getting confirmation that George Stark is actually a real person is when he actually calls Thad and they speak. I think that is kind of the true turning point of when I think a lot of readers probably would assume that, yeah, George Stark is real and Thad is actually kind of a normal guy. Another part I really enjoyed of this book was the whole underlying theme of twins, because Thad has twins, and when one got hurt, the other one got hurt, and they have had this like twin connection. And that is what we see with Thad and George Stark throughout the book, and their connection, how they're able to communicate with one another, and how we see sparrows flying around and communicating that way. So again, it was good, a good ambiance. Like, one thing I found myself really confused about was the fact that this was a Castle Rock book, but the majority of it was not in Castle Rock, only really like the end. And again, you know, I know that Castle Rock is staple Stephen King, but I'm gonna be honest, for some reason I was expecting a bit more, especially from like the 3rd novel, but what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do, you know? So what I found really interesting was the whole side of George Stark degrading throughout the book, and he's hard pressed to essentially revive his body because he becomes just decrepit, and he's kind of becoming like a zombie where like pieces of flesh are starting to blister and starting to fester and fall off. He's looking like the ghouls from Fallout. That's literally how I envision this guy, and I don't think it's that far off, honestly. I'm not gonna go through every little part of the plot, and I'm just gonna jump into the two most important parts. One, when Thad goes to the university to get some papers, ends up seeing his fellow professor, and that guy ends up giving him like a fucking whistle to control the sparrows, which are psychopomps. That was a big thing. You know, that's why there are two sparrows on the book. They are the harbingers of the dead. But anyway, this allows George Stark and the plot to move significantly forward and, you know, kidnap Liz and the twins and drive to their lake house, their cottage in Castle Rock. Here's one of my disappointments about it. And this is a personal thing. This is not necessarily because of Stephen King making the wrong decision or whatever. The prologue. I think we need to talk about the prologue. We see at the beginning of the book, our boy Thad gets a surgery, tumor removed, an eye, fingernails, a tooth get taken out of his skull, okay? Some like pretty vivid shit. And throughout the story, I'm like, okay, it gets teased a bit. It gets teased a bit because Officer Pangborn knows from Thad that he had a surgery, and he's like, I gotta talk to this doctor. I gotta talk to this doctor. This doctor is in Yellowstone. He's camping. He's hiking. I gotta get him. Dude, I was convinced that somehow this tumor got lost after they removed it, and that's what spawned George Stark, and it wasn't necessarily the staged pen name burial. But you know, the whole time I'm like, all right, I'm really interested in this. I'm like, wow, Stephen King is really not developing this. He's taking his time. It's gonna be a big reveal when he talks. And Officer Pangborn calls the doctor. They finally talk, and I'm like, this is it. This is it. And then the doctor's like, yeah, successful surgery, no problem. It was great, no problem. Except the birds. Yeah, the birds just kind of swarmed around, broke some windows and shit, but otherwise, we're good. And I'm just let down. I'm like, man, like I thought we were gonna have a bigger reveal than this, right? But alas, it isn't the case. And the part of me is like a bit frustrated because I'm like, I would have liked that to have gone somewhere. But at the same time, it is probably Stephen King leading you down to a dead end. It's like, that's it. There was nothing else. And, you know, and that kind of mimics real life a bit more, and not necessarily everything has to be important to the plot. There's some things that don't pan out, and that's it. So then we get to the final confrontation. Thad versus George Stark. I'm like, for the people who thought that Thad was still a murderer, this was the point when you realized, oh shit, okay, he's not fucking around. And they get in the house to do some talking, and then Thad seems super confident. He's like, I know what I'm gonna do, bro. I know what I'm gonna do. Don't worry, let me write the book with this guy. And they start writing. They have this very personal connection. Again, it's Stephen King and Richard Bachman talking. One is a bit more reserved than the other. One is darker than the other. One's more violent than the other. And this was a way to bury George Stark. And I'm like, okay, what's gonna happen? You know, how are we going to, resolve the story? And it's as straightforward as possible, man. It's essentially just, he uses that whistle, summons birds, and I'm, the whole time I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, is Thad gonna die? Is George gonna die? it's George, right? And then I'm like, okay, yeah, George is gonna die, right? And I'm like, how's he gonna get killed? Pencil through the eye, they're fighting and shit. No, birds. He gets killed by birds. Sparrows. Eaten, in fact. To the bone. Like, again, Stephen King. Why? That's weird as fuck. But I didn't expect the birds to eat him alive. And I'm just imagining this whole house being absorbed by sparrows, which, to be honest, the whole time I was thinking about European starlings and not like house sparrows. But, you know, as someone who's done bird watching in the past, I was thinking about European starlings. So, anyway, guy gets eaten alive by sparrows and gets whisked away in the night into oblivion. You know, that was one way to go. That was an interesting way to get killed in a Stephen King book. And then you just have, again, a very dark ending where Thad is just watches the house burn on fire. And, you know, you have Sheriff Pangborn narrating the whole scene saying, he's never gonna be the same, man. His wife never gonna look at him like she did before. The marriage is completely changed. And that's how it ends. I thought it wasn't as memorable as Cujo and not as memorable as some other novels like Misery. And I gave Cujo a 7. I'm gonna have to give The Dark Half a 6.5 out of 10. It's a 3-star read for people who use the star system, and it was fun while reading it. But overall, its straightforward nature, it makes the story good, but not entirely memorable. Let me know what you thought about The Dark Half. Were you alive when The Dark Half got released? Or are you someone like me, finding Stephen King way after he's written these books? Let me know if I'm out to lunch on these scores, or if you agreed with me. I'd love to hear your opinion. So thank you. And if you like the content, like and subscribe.